Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Last Round Boxing Podcast. Thank you again for joining us, whether you're returning, this is your first time, or your second time, or your 300th time. We appreciate each and every listener that we get on a weekly basis. Also, don't forget, I know we've been saying it for the last couple months, but we are now on YouTube. So every time we publish an episode to any of our platforms, they will also be posted to the YouTube channel as well. YouTube.com/@the-last-round-boxing-podcast. Or if you just search in the search bar of youtube.com, search the Last Round Podcast or the Last Round Boxing Podcast. Our logo, that cartoon logo that we've had for since our inception, should pop up and you should see our channel. So all of our catalog is on there. So if you prefer to listen on YouTube, check it out on YouTube. Especially if you have premium, you won't get ads and all that stuff. Or if you're still listening on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all that, we're still on there too. So it doesn't really matter. Wherever you want to listen to us, we are there. But like I mentioned, we are now on YouTube. Just search the Last Round Podcast, the Last Round Boxing Podcast. Check us out. Jumping straight back into it. Fight reviews, this past Saturday, the 21st of September, from Wembley Stadium in London on DAZN pay-per-view. Daniel Dynamite DuBois gets the 5th round knockout and the biggest win of his career, at least in my opinion, over Anthony Joshua. This was for the IBF Heavyweight Championship of the World in front of just under 100,000 people at Wembley Stadium. I think it was like 98,000 or something like that. So just a hair under the 100,000 mark. Essentially, if you round up, it was 100,000 people there. I don't know if they counted. I know the WWE in past, because they are a public company. I've always thought this was funny, but I remember in a past quarterly call for their investors, they were asked about the number of people that were in their stadium show. I forgot what stadium show. It might have been one of their WrestleManias or something. And they said, "Oh, we count everybody who's in the building at the same time, which includes all the employees, the ushers, the security." So they were counting each and every person, even the ones that were working there and the ones who were like, performers and all that. I've always thought that was interesting. So is it a 98,000 including all the employees and all the actual people who didn't pay a ticket, or is that 98,000 paid? So I've always remembered that. But as I mentioned, Dynamite Daniel DuBois gets the biggest win of his career with the 5th round KO over Anthony Joshua for the IBF Heavyweight Championship of the World. So last week we had Yahoo Sports and Fights ATW's Ryan O'Hara, first time on the show. We appreciate Ryan O'Hara for jumping on and subbing in for me, essentially, because I couldn't make it last week. So he helped out Mike in the episode for last week to preview this matchup. So Mike, remind me, and remind our listeners who you went for last week. Who was your prediction? And then what was your reaction upon seeing the outcome of this past Saturday at Wembley?
Can't remember if I actually gave a pick last week with Ryan, but I would have probably gone with Joshua, probably around 7 or 8 stoppage, just because he'd been in the big fights before. Obviously, Daniel DuBois had been in some big fights and obviously come up, short in those against like Joe Joyce and then obviously like Usyk. But he completely changed that all around for everybody. I think going into it, people that have listened to the show for a while, I've always kind of said that I thought Joshua was more of a athlete that boxes. If you've ever watched him, he doesn't really have like a great boxing brain and stuff like that. He's just got lots of fast twitch fibers, probably could have turned his hand to most sports and done pretty well at it. And I always thought that he was a bit of a bully fighter. And I always thought that if somebody eventually put it on him, that I think he would crumble. And that's essentially what Daniel DuBois did. He just came out and said, I'm taking the center of the ring, I'm pushing you back, and Joshua was completely lost. After that, got knocked down early on.
The first round, wasn't it?
Yeah, got knocked down early in the pardon me. In the first round, never really recovered. You could see that he's always able to get back up. It's just his legs. His legs seem to go once he gets, clocked on the chin. And then after that, it was just kind of, when DuBois was going to get him out of there rather than if. He was probably saved in the first round by the bell. I think it was the third round also. He was saved by the bell. And then eventually just obviously knocked completely out in the fifth. And, kind of shocked the world, I guess, that day. I'm sure there was a few people that had DuBois, but I think probably the general consensus was Joshua was probably more experienced, been in the bigger fights. And, Daniel DuBois had shown previous of, I think, bottling it. It's probably a bit of a strong word, but maybe letting the nerves and stuff like that get to him on certain occasions. So, yeah, unbelievable victory for DuBois, a new face of the heavyweight division.
So do you think that Anthony Joshua, obviously from the outside looking in, do you think he underestimated Daniel DuBois, or do you think it's just, he went in there taking DuBois seriously and DuBois just beat him to the punch?
Yeah, I think it was DuBois had confidence going into it because he'd sparred with him, and obviously there was those rumors that he either dropped him or, pretty much punched him and had him out on his feet and respectfully didn't finish him off. It tends to be the general consensus, I think. And I think DuBois went into the fight with supreme confidence, knowing that, I'm essentially the underdog. I'm the IBF champion, but I'm walking first because AJ's that much bigger than me. I'm second on the poster. It was Joshua and DuBois, even though DuBois was the champion. And I think he kind of knew at the time, I'm going to knock him out. I've done it in sparring. I'm bigger. I'm better than I was then. I'm gonna get him. Obviously Joshua's older. If anything, he's going to be worse. And DuBois already kind of had him out on his feet years back when he was sparring him. So I think he went in there with confidence, and he proved to be right. It was a bad performance by Joshua, dropping his hands constantly, a habit that he's had for a while, but he's always managed to get away with it because he was always getting people out of there. So.
Let me ask you this, and I agree that if I was here last week previewing the fight, I would have went with Joshua too. He's just been on the bigger stage for a lot longer, and he's been on a multi-fight win streak for a while. So I thought the momentum was on his side, but I wouldn't have counted out DuBois. He's a young guy, he's a big guy. He's what, 6'4", maybe 6'5", 6'4". He's also a big guy. And like you said, they've sparred before, so he has some familiarity. That's sufficient enough for him to be in that ring. But how does this affect the plans for a Tyson Fury matchup that it seems like Turkey Al-Sheikh and Matchroom and a lot of people were relying on to happen possibly next between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury? Because Tyson Fury was in the, one of the first rows right there. He was right there ringside.
It may have lost a tiny bit of the luster, a little bit of the glitz and the glamour, because it's probably not going to be a world title on the line if those two meet. Because I think Usyk may defeat Tyson Fury again, so Fury will have no belt. Joshua's not going to have a belt. But I think it's one of those fights where we all say as fans, I'm not going to watch it. Tyson Fury's washed up, Joshua's washed up, and then we watch it. Look at how far past the sell-by dates was Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, Kell Brook and Amir Khan. And we all say we're not going to watch it, and we always do. Look, right. Pacquiao and Floyd is the biggest selling pay-per-view of all time. And they were, 5, 6, 7 years past their sell-by date? So I still think Fury and AJ would still do great numbers, maybe a little bit less money in the pot than it would have been because there's going to be no world titles on, like I said. But I still think it would do great numbers, especially in Britain, because we always just seem to get behind our own and, kind of regardless of anything, we'll still watch it. And it's just, Because if you look at the resume wise, if AJ has 2 more fights, he fights Fury, and then he also fights Wilder. He's probably fought every single big name heavyweight that's been around in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Resume-wise, that would be unbelievable. Even if he lost to him, just the fact that he had the balls to get in the ring with all of these guys, because he fought Pulev, he fought Povetkin, he's fought Usyk, he's fought the who's who, Dillian White. He's fought who's of everyone, Klitschko.
Let me ask you, and I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to bring that up as well. At this high of a level in the sport, fighting, at prize fighting level that I would say Anthony Joshua's been on for a long time. Canelo's obviously, has fought everybody as well. He's literally fought everybody to the point where he's like, oh, who can I fight next? And people are still going to criticize him, but like, there's literally, he's fought everybody because he's been around for so long. If you had to think about it, is Anthony Joshua maybe like either tied or right behind Canelo in terms of kind of having a same similarity where he's literally fought everybody, He's never, you can't really ever accuse him of, I guess, visible politicking because he's literally fought everybody. Obviously there's politicking in the sport, even at that, especially at the highest level. And when I mean politicking, I mean like, they don't fight these guys. Like a lot of the PBC guys, for the longest time, they didn't fight anybody, which is unfortunate because a lot of those guys were like really excellent fighters and it would have been fun. But, promotional alliances, money, broadcasting partners, it all got in the way. But it's Canelo and then Anthony Joshua in terms of, whatever criticism they get, you can't say that they haven't fought literally every significant fighter in and around their weight class for years now.
Yeah, he really has, especially for the amount of shit that he gets, and that's including myself. I've given him, a lot of shit because I don't think he's the most talented fighter, but it works for him, and he's never really shirked that many fights. Obviously, he's got losses on his record, but so do the favorites that we all talk about, Duran, Ali. We look at those guys, and they've all lost. So to me, if he has like 2 or 3 fights left and fights, like I said, Wilder, if he gets the Fury fight in there, then I'm pretty sure after that, I think he's pretty much completed the top 10 over the last few years. He's fought all of them. Because if you look at resume-wise, his resume is probably better than Fury's, even though Fury has the bigger wins, because obviously he beat Wilder, he beat Klitschko in his prime. And then if you look at Wilder's resume, he's never fought most of the guys that Joshua fought. Never fought Povetkin, didn't fight Pulev.
AJ's activities, obviously, he's been an active fighter, where Fury's hasn't really been a consistently active fighter.
No, Fury's got a very strange record because he's fought like a lot of trash, and then he just jumps up there and he fought like Klitschko. Then he fought trash, jumped up, fought Wilder, and then he just dropped back down again and fought like Chisora, Dillian White. Very, very odd, like choice of fights, really to leap up and down like that.
If you were at a bar or a pub in London or the UK anywhere, how do you think people would react to that question that you just mentioned? Like, who's had overall the better career as of this point? Is it Fury or Anthony Joshua? Because you're right. Like, I mean, AJ, you can't dispute that he's been the consistently active fighter. He's fought everybody. And Fury has had the more significant wins probably. But how would that conversation go over there?
That's a good one, isn't it? Because Tyson seems to be liked by like the boxing hardcore, I guess, because he's got a higher boxing IQ. People just don't like the weird stuff that he says. Whereas Anthony Joshua's the the casual's favorite, someone that like your grandmother would be like, oh, he looks like a nice guy because he's that clean cut image, super nice guy. He always, companies will have him promote.
He's the definition of a marketable athlete.
Yeah, you're not going to see Tyson Fury promoting Gucci or like a brand because of the craziness that comes out of his mouth, where Joshua's a marketing dream. So like I think a lot more of the casuals love him. That's why he sells out stadiums like nobody else. Not even Canelo sells out like he does, compared to someone like a Fury or someone like that. So yeah, I think the boxing hardcore would probably go Fury because of the big wins that he's had, like, you know, the huge fights with like the Wilder trilogy and the Klitschko, whereas I think more of the general public would always side with AJ.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just, you know, there's numerous questions in sports, especially boxing, that would cause this contentious back and forth debate. And when you brought that up, I was like, I'm sure over there in the UK, or even a lot of our listeners over there, they're probably yelling at us right now, like, oh no, these guys are crazy. It's Fury or it's AJ. But I feel like that's a pretty significant debate. Like, oh yeah, who's had the better career up to this point? Because you're right. I think Fury's probably had the more impactful wins, would you say, than Joshua? But Joshua's just had more quality wins on a more consistent basis. You know?
I would say there's only probably the Klitschko fight for AJ that you'd look back on and say that was an amazing fight to watch. Whereas Fury's probably got the Wilder trilogy. They were all really good to watch.
Yeah.
The Klitschko win was an unbelievable win, but in terms of performance, I'm not going to waste an hour of my life watching that again. It was absolutely atrocious.
Right.
He just kind of punched him and hugged him for 12 rounds and, you know, took a points win, but it was effective enough to dethrone someone that had been world champion for like something like 10 years.
You talk about, you know, Joshua when he beat Klitschko, you know, what a story that was, you know. I think there was like a picture that was taken when Joshua was like over Klitschko, and it was the definition of, you know, a combat sport on that night. And DuBois this past Saturday and Joshua, I mean, that was a fun fight. Mm-hmm. The 5 rounds, like, I don't think anybody in that stadium, almost 100,000 people, were complaining. I think they all probably left and got their money's worth and like just kept partying. You know, like people like, because they both went down. Didn't DuBois go down or no?
No, just Joshua.
It was just Joshua, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, so Joshua went down multiple times and then obviously ended up getting stopped. But there was moments where he did hurt DuBois. So like, if you kind of try to ignore the actual knockdowns, there was some momentum swings for those 5 rounds, you know? So the energy in that stadium was like, oh, what's going on? And then, you know, then Joshua goes down, and then up until that, up before he got knocked down and he lost the fight, Joshua, I think, had connected with like a straight right hand to DuBois that knocked DuBois off his equilibrium. You could tell he was like, oh, that one hurt. And at that point, you think, oh, wow, he hurt him. So he's going to pounce on him. And then he starts engaging with him. And DuBois just starts going back. And I mean, literally, like, DuBois he beat him to the punch during that exchange. Because DuBois was hurt. But DuBois, like, instead of, you know, defending him, or instead of, you know, blocking the shots and going in the corner and just try to survive the round, he fought back and beat him to the punch, and then knocked him out. I mean, you know, I think we've talked about this before, but you know, boxing, obviously there's a skill to it. There's excellent boxers who don't like to fight like that. They don't like to engage, and they like to be more technical, more calculated, you know, more calm, which works. But like you said, Anthony Joshua has likely has more casual fans than, let's just say, Tyson Fury. And all those fans who were in that building on that night and all the ones that were tuning in, that's exactly why they tune in, because it's just like, it's kind of like Amir Khan. If you want to kind of throw somebody in a similar capacity as AJ is, Khan was very popular, but also like he was always in exciting fights. And he lost a couple times too, but I think that's why people were drawn to him, because he was like, oh, he's a fun fighter to watch, and he's like, Khan also had like a lot of, like you said, like he had, like we talked about AJ having like the Gucci and all these high value sponsorships. Khan was the same way. Amir Khan was a very marketable fighter, he was an Olympian. But it comes down to like, obviously you can be undefeated and still make good money and stuff like that. But if you're, and it's not saying that like fighters should do this, but like some of them just, when they keep fighting like this and they engage, even if they know like, I'm going to go for it, but I might get beat to the punch, but I'm going to go for it. Like sometimes at the end of the day, sometimes that's that move or that sacrifice in terms of your career is actually better, because like you said, the fans and the casual fans, like they'll be like, oh, these guys, this is what I paid for. I didn't want to pay for like these two guys throwing less than 5 punches around, and then at the end of the 12 rounds, they each only threw like 75 punches, and it was a boring fight. And obviously that happens a lot, but that's where the money's at, right? Is the casual fan. The casual fan is who pays to see, like, that's where your money's at, when you can tap into that. And I think Anthony Joshua has a casual fan base, like that's significant. Canelo definitely has a casual fan base that's significant. I mean, he's proven that. Ryan Garcia has a casual fan base. I mean, I think it's prominent enough to say that. And then probably Tank Davis. I mean, I think that's it. Who else is there, right? In terms of having that type of fan base.
Yeah, I don't think that's about it. I couldn't think of anyone else that you could throw on pay-per-view and they'd do a few 100,000. That's probably it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's less than 5 fighters. And I mean, if you want to include Japan, you have Inoue, at least over there. If you want to include Japan.
Yeah, he probably does crazy numbers over there.
Oh yeah, he's a superstar over there. I mean, I think I'm willing to bet that he's like, I don't know if you could measure it. I know Japan's smaller country and stuff like that, but if you can measure it, he might be like a bigger star in his world. Like if you want to use the term pound for pound, than maybe like Canelo or AJ is in their respective countries. I mean, I think it's like close, but Inoue he's a superstar over there, man. He's a superstar. But yeah, DuBois, going back to this, DuBois gets the KO in the 5th round, becomes the IBF heavyweight champion, or actually he retained his IBF heavyweight championship of the world. I think Eddie Hearn said in subsequent interviews that there's a rematch clause. So I'm assuming we're going to see a rematch, right?
So I was watching the interviews today, and he said that they have one more fight with Riyadh season, and one of the names that's on that list of potential opponents is Daniel DuBois. So it's kind of a rematch clause. He's pretty much saying if he turned around to Turki Ali Sheikh and said, hey, for our final fight, we want Daniel DuBois, he would be like, okay. So it's kind of a rematch.
You think that would happen in the UK again? London? I think it should. I think it should.
After that, maybe, because of the amount of fans that were there. And
those people would show up again. They would fill up over 90,000 seats again.
I don't know if they're just playing us, though, because normally they say that the rematch goes the same way and normally worse. And the fact that he got dropped 4 times and knocked out in the 5th, he's going to get knocked out in the 2nd. Daniel DuBois is just going to come in even more confident.
No, right. But I mean, and AJ's already shown like when he fought Ruiz, he becomes a little bit more timid and he just wins the fight on the outside and wins by boxing. I mean, he'll get the win, but he knows like, I'm not going to take the risk that I take the first time, But he was getting that criticism for a long time after the Ruiz fight.
Why not? Why not go and fight a big money person like a Wilder, or just wait for a Fury, or maybe even, because I imagine he's probably popular over in Asia. But go and fight Zhilei Zhang.
I honestly, I can see Joshua like, even though Wilder's just kind of like he just doesn't have. I don't know. Like, what? See, the thing is here is that the last, couple years or so, last 5 years or so, like there's been so much back and forth in the heavyweight division. Like, I mean, you have Fury and Joshua who are your superstars in terms of drawing money. Usyk's probably your best pound for pound. I mean, I don't think that there's no dispute there. He's probably your best pound for pound fighter in the heavyweight division. But in terms of drawing money and being like box office, it's Fury and Joshua. And now like DuBois gets in here after having a couple losses too. And then, like it, I just don't think like it is Usyk is Usyk the most consistent? Like, is he the main guy in the heavyweight division? Or is it anybody else? Because there's been so much back and forth. I feel like Usyk's been the only constant since he's moved up to heavyweight division where he's like, well, nobody's beating him. Everybody else has lost. And, they win a couple, then they lose. I mean, is Usyk the most constant?
Yeah. I think everybody else has had a loss, haven't they, really? Like Joe Joyce lost, Daniel DuBois lost and then came back. Joseph Parker has had that crazy winning streak. But yeah, everybody else hasn't really looked on this anywhere near as good as Usyk. And you've got to wonder how many fights do all of those guys have left? Usyk probably only has a few. Joshua, Wilder, Chisora, White.
Right.
But we're only a year or maybe 2 years away from a completely different division.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And DuBois is what, 20, maybe 28?
I think he might be like 26 or something crazy.
Oh, he's maybe younger than that. I mean, and AJ is what, 33, 34?
Yeah, I think he's at 34, I think.
Fury's 37, maybe?
And then you got like Wilder.
Wilder's probably closer to 40.
Yeah.
Maybe 39.
Joe Joyce is obviously on there older because of the amount of amateur experience he's had. Like Chisora's like what, 40 or something like that. Like it's all.
Frank Warren must be so over the moon right now. I mean, he's had a pretty good year against Matchroom.
It's funny, isn't it? When you look at it now, it's like his stable. He's got the heavyweight division on lockdown. He has Fury, Daniel Dubois.
Yeah.
And he has Moses Atuma, who's like the up-and-coming British heavyweight that wants to try to beat Mike Tyson's record.
Yeah.
For being the youngest champion. Like, he's got that division sewn up for the next 10 years.
I mean, if they win, but like I said, with the heavyweight division going so back and forth so often now, you just never know. I could see Joshua telling Eddie Hearn, like, no, I want the rematch.
I mean,
or maybe...
I could see that because he seems to be overly confident, I think, at times, like when he talked about like trying to outbox Usyk, you're like, are you on the same planet as us? No one believes that you can do that. That's not you. That's not what you do. And I think that was the problem at times. He needed to get back to basics, and then he kind of tried that against Dubois. But when he was going back to basics, he was also lacking some, a lot of the fundamentals. Keeping your hands up. You would try to punch from out of range, which, like you said, like when he leapt in with that uppercut, which was the final shot, Dubois just came straight in, like, boom, straight on the kisser. That was it. Out.
That was it. Yeah. I mean, either way, I think it's fair to say that the heavyweight division is entertaining. And it has been ever since both Klitschko's retired, even though the Klitschko's were so dominant. Like, ever since they retired, the heavyweight division has been pretty fun. We've had a pretty fun heavyweight division.
as much as boxing at times lacks a lot of the showmanship and the sometimes isn't as good an event as the UFC because they fill in a lot. They'll say the main event's coming on at this time, so they'll just hold it. They'll start talking. They'll do video packages, whereas the UFC just rolls it. That fight's finished, up comes the next. That fight's finished, up comes the next.
Right.
When it's nothing compares to a heavyweight main event.
Oh, yeah. That's
nothing.
big. Yeah. That's big. Yeah, there's definitely a difference there. I mean, I think in the UFC, you mentioned the UFC, I think the only one who could generate that type of emotion or buzz for them is Conor McGregor, who was also coincidentally in the house there.
You could just see him in the background on the camera.
Yeah, I saw some clips like when he stands up like right before the knockdown or the knockout before the end of the fight, and you could just see like his body language is like, oh, like it's a pretty entertaining clip. You could tell he's like really into it. And Fury's just standing right in front of him or sitting right in front of him, just like staring, because what's going through his mind. He's like, man, there goes my payday. Like, I mean, him and Joshua, I still think they're going to fight sometime next year, but
all of the big fights that I can remember that give me those type of emotions is Joshua Ruiz, the first one.
That was fun.
Joshua Klitschko.
Yep.
Fury Wilder.
Yep.
Probably the first and the second. The third, you kind of expected it.
Yeah.
And then this one. Just that kind of like, oh my God, what the hell?
I mean, AJ's been in most of them.
Yeah.
Like we said, you can't honestly criticize him for not taking the risks. Regardless if he's like you said, if he's an athlete who just knows like he can fight and he's kind of robotic, but he figures it out enough to be successful. Like,
just does the basics super well.
Yeah.
Then he kind of lost that.
I mean, look at where he's at. I mean, like he's done everything super well. Like it worked out for him, He's pretty successful. Yeah. So
it's the only division where you can get away with that, not having like a huge boxing IQ. Because how many times is it you see like a fighter who gets in the ring and then they'll say like, especially over here in America, they'll say like, oh, such and such fighter used to be an NFL player, used to be a basketball player.
Right.
He was a college athlete. And then you realize like, well, this guy's only been boxing for like 10 years. Like Wilder, for example, started boxing at 18?
Yeah.
Joshua started like in his teens as well, because it's either like, you need to get your act together and start boxing, or you're going to go to prison, get in trouble with the law, stuff like that. Whereas, all the other fighters, they've been boxing since they were kids.
Yeah.
That's why.
I mean, sometimes it's just the talent, and the discipline. And I mean, I think, like you said, you could give it to Wilder and Joshua for starting later, because there's guys who've been boxing since they were kids, 5 years old, and they never reach that pinnacle. They never even get close to having that success. And some guys just have it, and some guys don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the difference. Also on the card, Joshua Buatsi gets the split decision victory over Willie Hutchinson for the WBO Interim Light Heavyweight Championship. Buatsi remains undefeated at 19-0. What do you think about this fight?
Bizarre. Just how one judge can give it to Hutchinson, even though he was down twice and had a point deducted.
Yeah, that was nuts.
I thought it was going to be a closer fight, to be honest with you. But
it was a good matchup.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Hutchinson had a small chance, but then Buatsi kind of just went in there and showed how good he is. But when is Buatsi ever going to like step up and face all these big names? Like, okay, he picked up a WBO interim. So in his mind, he's probably like, well, like kind of sitting around and not being super active and, not facing some of these big names has paid off because, I'm nearly a world champion. But the amount of, furore and backing that he had after the Olympics to then kind of have the career that he's had. It's just...
Maybe you think he's waiting for the winner of Bivol and Beterbiev?
I mean, he could get it, but it's like...
I mean, he's undefeated, 19-0. I mean, if you think about besides those two...
But who's he fought?
No, I know, but like if you think about besides Bivol and Beterbiev as light heavyweight, like Who else is there that could, they can kind of make some money. In the UK, they can make some money.
You mean like as an opponent for Buatsi?
Either or. I mean, like, I feel like Buatsi's probably gotten to that point where he can fight that winner of that match, no? That matchup?
Yeah, I think it may go to Benavidez though, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously Benavidez is, you don't think about Benavidez because he's so wrapped up in the Canelo sweepstakes, but you're right. He is at 175. But
like, why not fight Anthony Yard? How long has that been spoken about?
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
It's a big British fight. It's going to do.
I think that'll happen sooner than you think.
Maybe Buatsi's waiting for if he gets hold of the WBA full title. Obviously not the interim.
Right.
Maybe he's going to get that, or maybe he's waiting. If Bivol fights Beterbiev, which is coming up, the winner fights Benavidez. Maybe he's fighting, thinking that he'll get the winner of that.
Maybe he's just like, let me see. Let me just keep going until I get to one of those significant.
I'm thinking, that's what he's doing. Like with his career, he's just banking on getting that big payday, and then.
I mean, it's not like we haven't seen this story before.
It just seems like it's a waste of a career because he's been a pro for how many years and he's not fought Bivol, Beterbiev, Benavidez, Morrell, Callum Smith, The Nail, even like people like Jesse Hart, Anthony Yard.
He's probably going to be one of those guys that just kind of compacts everything into like a year and a half where he's just going to fight a lot of these guys.
I mean, then I'll give him some credit if he does.
I don't know how else you could do it, right?
I mean, he must be getting good. I mean, he blamed Matchroom, right?
Right.
He went to Boxer, and he's done absolutely nothing since he's been there. So I think it's starting to show that he's the one that's obviously the issue because either he's turning down big fights or how much he thinks he should be paid for these big fights is obviously too much.
Right.
Because he doesn't sell tickets. So just because you're a world champion or you're a contender doesn't mean you get a set amount of money if you don't put in butts in seats.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's a give and take there, for as much criticism that takes, that is true. I mean, it's the business at the end of the day. These promoters are going to be like, we're losing money. Look at Bob Arab. And of course, Bob Arab has said a lot of things in the past, 80-something years old. He said a lot of things that, have been inaccurate or whatever, but he loses Crawford becomes a free agent. He leaves and he gets sued for alleged like racism in Top Rank. Then he says like, I lost money on every single one of his fights. And it's like Crawford's like a significant fighter, but I mean, you're right. It's putting butts in seats,
because look at Roman Gonzalez, Chocolatito, one of the best fighters around, pound for pound, probably the best fighter for several years. He doesn't get paid like Canelo does.
Oh, of course not.
Because he's not as popular.
Right. Yeah. His biggest years were during the Superfly cards out here in LA.
He probably made all of his money towards the end because the Superfly cards brought attention, and then DAZN and people like that kind of jumped on board, and people like Sonny Edwards, who has the charisma.
Right.
He made all of his money right now over the last few years.
Yeah, exactly. Also on the card, and Anthony, what is it? How do you pronounce his last name?
Kakachi
gets the 12-round unanimous decision win over Josh Warrington. This was for the IBO and IBF Super Featherweight Championship. And then also Hamza Shiraz remains undefeated at 21-0 with the second round TKO over Tyler Denny, who takes the third loss of his career. This is for the Commonwealth and EBU Middleweight Championship. What do you think about Shiraz's win?
He's getting dangerous, dude.
He is, isn't he?
Yeah. I saw him again when I worked the Riyadh season card.
Oh, in LA? Yeah.
In LA, I spoke to him then because I met him at the airport. I think I said it on the show one time, and he recognized me and we chatted and stuff like that. And he was talking about super skinny, super tall, and super skinny.
Right.
And those always seem to be the guys that can bang. If you look at like Hagler and Wilder, like he's got that same type of build.
Fundora, look at him, he could bang.
Yeah, Fundora as well. Yeah. he's going to be dangerous. It's going to be interesting just to see, because I think he's highly ranked in all of the sanctioning bodies' rankings. To see which one he goes with. I think if I was him, I would probably choose, and I think it's probably the most likely. I think I'd go with Carlos Adames.
Oh, that's an interesting matchup.
I think that's obtainable. I think Lara, PBC, probably not going to get it. And
I do feel like the PBC over there, and they're with Amazon, like they're forcing that. Amazon has their hand forced, or PBC has their hand forced to justify their agreement with Amazon Prime Video. So that's why they're making, I mean, look at the reported negotiations between Tank Davis and all these opponents. That, I mean, when he was under Showtime, it was, they weren't really giving a lot of shots to anybody else outside the bubble. Even now, like, I know you found Frank Martin, and Frank Martin's in the bubble, but now they're trying to, like, get all these other guys, and it's just not working. And now they're saying that he's going to fight Lamont Roach. Good for Lamont Roach. He's represented by Robert Diaz, formerly of Golden Boys, on his team. Congratulations on getting if he gets that fight solidified. It's a nice payday for him. But I mean, for somebody it's like Tank Davis, it's like, we want. Obviously, I don't know what happened with who they reached out to. I think they said that they reached out to, like, Teofimo Lopez and some other people. I mean,
did you see that Robert Garcia put on? They reached.
Oh, yeah, for Rayo, he said. I think he said that
135. He wanted.
Yeah, they wanted him to go down to 135, even though Rayo just won a belt at 140.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is what it is. I mean, yeah, these guys just have to fight people, like,
but out opponents.
But like, I like the Carlos Adames as an opponent for Shiraz, but I don't see it anytime soon. I don't see it anytime soon. What?
I think he has a very good chance of winning that if he gets it.
Oh yeah. I think I'd be a fun fight, but I think I'd probably lean towards Shiraz to pull out that victory. But Adames can fight too, though. He can fight.
Yeah, Adames has been on a bit of a tear recently, because I think the Lara fight probably wouldn't happen. Charlo probably wouldn't happen. And then obviously you've got Zanibek.
Yeah.
Zanibek's very talented. I'm not too sure on how Shiraz would get on in that fight. So for me, if I was on his camp, I think I would be pushing him towards the Adames fight.
Yeah, I can see that. Moving on to fight previews. This upcoming Friday, the 27th of September, from the Trilith Studios Town Stage. What a name that is, in Fayetteville, Georgia. I think it's the first time we've ever shouted out Fayetteville, Georgia for a fight. Alicia Baumgardner, 15-1, returns to the wing as she goes up against Delfine Persoon, 49-3, for the IBO and WBC Super Featherweight Championship. Where's this being broadcasted at? Do we know?
Oh, good question. I got it from BoxRec, and they didn't have it up there. And it's been put on by it's not a well-known promoter, so I'm guessing maybe like a pay-per-view channel or like a Facebook or something like that.
Local channel or something?
It's an all-female card.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sure it's going to be broadcasted somewhere, but I mean, it doesn't seem like it's... BoxRec usually lists like the broadcaster, right?
Yeah, sometimes if it's like a big one, like BT, TNT,
The Zone or something.
A few of the Spanish and Mexican channels. But if it's something bizarre, like it's not really on there. This is her first fight back, right, since her ban?
I think so. Yeah. So let's see. If
interesting fight. One where I could actually see her lose if Delfine Persoon has.
Well, Persoon's just so experienced. You never know.
And she just throws so much.
Yeah.
When she fought Katie Taylor, it was like it will, because Alicia Baumgardner has the power,
right?
But if Persoon could outwork her if she's got anything left. But the problem is she's had 52 fights. This is her 53rd fight.
That's insane.
And she's older and stuff like that. So I'd like to see Baumgardner win. I like watching her. I think she's a good fighter, and she's one of the few female fighters that can actually like get a KO. So I'd like her to win, but I tell you something, it's a hard comeback fight.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, like we talked about before, the female division in general isn't that deep.
No.
So you kind of just have to fight whoever you can. So
Yeah, Russ, I'm sure if you fought like an unknown, your purse is going to be tiny.
exactly. Also, this upcoming Friday from the Madison Square Garden Theater in New York City on ESPN Plus, Sandy Ryan 7-1-1 goes up against Mikaela Maye 19-2 for the WBO welterweight title, and also Xander Zayas 19-0 goes up against Damian Sosa 25-2. What do you think about these matchups? Is a top rank card?
Yeah, top rank card. Yeah, interesting one for the main Sandy Ryan, Mikaela Maye. Obviously, Maye up at welterweight now. Sandy Ryan more heavy-handed, so it's going to be interesting because Maye always kind of a little bit still said I had the amateur. She didn't really have anything to kind of like back you off. So I wonder if she's going to have enough power to stop Sandy Ryan coming forward. But as we always say, you don't really get many knockouts or many TKOs in women's boxing. So Mikaela Maye may be able to just stay on the outside, kind of use her, very good amateur skills, and then just kind of box her from the outside and take a 10-round decision, unfortunately.
And then also this upcoming Saturday, the 28th of September, from the Casino Miami Jai Alai. I hope I said that right. In Miami.
Don King Promotions again.
Don King Promotions is back. He has it. The guy's just been going for freaking 50 years, or even longer than that. Norer Makajilian. That's all I'm gonna try. It's 27-2, goes up against Ryan Rozicki. I hope I said that right. 20-1 for the WBC Cruiserweight Championship. Don King, huh? He just won't go away. He's still there. Isn't that insane? I wonder how much money he's literally made. Because obviously he was like the guy in the 90s and especially in the 90s, but he was the guy. But the fact that he's still putting on cards, and then he still he had Broner at one point, and I think he has. Does he still have Blair Cobbs?
Yeah.
Who was formerly with Golden Boy? I mean,
yeah.
Don King, man, he does not stop. He does not stop. News and notes section of this week's episode of the Last Round Boxing Podcast. Jaime Munguia is looking to make 2024 his busiest year since 2018. As ESPN reports that he'll reportedly meet Ronald Cabril on December 14th in Tijuana, Mexico, where Munguia is from. I mean, I think he's doing it exactly how you should, right? You lose a fight, especially like a big fight to, Canelo Alvarez, which was his biggest fight to date. And just like we talked about Joshua earlier, you lose a fight and then you come back, you stay active and you keep winning and winning and winning until you get back up and to the top again. I think Munguia being active, I mean, I think that's literally the most appropriate and best plan he could do, right?
Yeah, 100%. I know we're very fickle as fans, aren't we? We complain if people don't fight, and when they do fight and he comes back and he pretty much has a gimme, I guess, against someone like Roland Gavril, we complain about that as well. So,
right.
There's no pleasing us as fans. I didn't even know Ronald Gavril was still fighting. I'm sure people will...
He fought Benavidez, too. I think he beat Benavidez a pretty tough fight back in the day, right?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, I was just about to say that, yeah.
You never know. Maybe they're... Maybe Top Rank or hey, is Munguia still with Golden Boy in a weird way? Or is it a partnership, or is he signed with Top Rank legitimately now?
I'd have to check the wording.
I've heard I've heard and I've read different things that he's kind of on loan to Top Rank, and I mean De La Hoya and Bob Arum are friendly, so I could see that. But then I've also seen no, he signed with Top Rank, but I haven't seen anything concrete. I'm sure there's something out there. I just haven't seen it.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and kind of look at the wording of how they put it out.
And then also Jaron Boots Ennis and Jesse Bam Rodriguez will defend their titles on the same card in November 9th at the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Eddie Hearn of Matchroom Boxing said this past Friday. That's a pretty fun card, man. That's a pretty fun card with those two guys. So, and then obviously Boots Ennis is from Philadelphia, so he should draw pretty decent there. And then They're going to be able to see Bam Rodriguez on that card as well. So he should make some new fans in the Philadelphia area because he's obviously a fun fight, and obviously those lower weight classes throw more punches. So that should be a pretty fun card to be at. Ennis, obviously 32-0 with 28 KOs, is ESPN's #1 ranked welterweight, and he's gonna in November put his IBF welterweight title on the line against Karen Chukstanzian. That's another hard one in a 12-round bout. It's going to be a rematch from their January 2023 bout when Ennis swept the scorecards in a dominant decision victory. Bam Rodriguez, is 20-0 with 13 KOs, who is number 7 on ESPN's pound-for-pound rankings, and will defend his WBC junior bantamweight title against Pedro Guevara, also in a 12-round bout. It will be Rodriguez's first defense of the title, which he won by knocking out Juan Francisco Estrada in the 7th round, I believe earlier this year, right? So that's a fun card, man. So all of our Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or surrounding cities over there in that part of the country of the United States, if you got nothing to do on, November 9th, out there in Philadelphia, pretty fun card to be at night of the town. That's a fun card, man. I would go to that card if it was out here in California. I would go to that card. That seems like a fun card with those two guys.
Big fan of both.
Yeah, definitely. But once again, guys, we appreciate you guys listening to this week's episode of the Last Round Boxing Podcast. As I mentioned at the beginning, go ahead and check us out on YouTube. We are now on YouTube, youtube.com/@the-last-round-boxing-podcast, or search us in the search bar, The Last Round Podcast, The Last Round Boxing Podcast. You'll see our cartoon logo pop up. Click the button, click the channel, hit the subscribe button, rate us, interact with the comments, send us a message and all that. And even if you guys want to us to answer some questions or something that you guys are thinking about, what do the guys think about this? Go ahead and email us, send us a message on Twitter, on YouTube, and all that. Put it in the comments or something. I know some other boxing podcasts do that. So we're open to that. If you want to ever send us questions, whether it's through email, our email is obviously on our Twitter accounts, on our link tree and all that stuff. Or you can send us a Twitter private message or any type of comment on Twitter or on YouTube. Anything you want us to talk about or address, send us a question and we will discuss it. But for once again, Mike, before we completely sign off again for this week, go ahead and let them know where they can find us and follow us.
At the Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter. Be sure to join us next week. We'll be previewing the Zanibek IBF world title defense and also looking towards the Nick Ball against Ronnie Rios, which is in Liverpool on October 5th.
Ronnie Rios returning, huh? We talked about it a couple weeks ago. So returning after a pretty, temporary retirement. So let's see how I'm sure they offered him a pretty decent amount of money to get back in the saddle right there, right?
World title shot.
Yeah. So good for him. So, selfishly, I'm pulling for the guy. So we'll see. We will see. But for my co-host, Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round Podcast.